Today, I like to talk to you about how I overcame depression. And you might think, how could Mary Louise be depressed? She stands for lovely, light living. But I was very, very depressed. I was actually suicidal. It was just like dark clouds everywhere. I'll tell you a little bit about that later, about the story behind it. But I also stand for finding joy in movement. And movement really, really helped me a lot to overcome depression. I'll explain a little bit more later, but for right now, let's just play a few games. If you put your hand on your heart and you just go, sigh, okay, that movement, didn't that make you feel better? Like as if whatever it was, that instant has passed and you can just relax. Or say if you're sitting like this, sort of looking down, I think I might just go out and eat worms. And then you lift up your eyes and you lift up your heart, and that just makes you feel better. And that's a movement. It brings joy to a sad situation. Or put your hand on your heart and just feel it. There's something about my heart and my brain that is related. And somehow when I put my hand on my heart, I can engage my brain in just a little different way. A while back, I found out that the thymus gland is right here, right under your sternum, and that you can actually tap your thymus gland, and that's your gland of happiness. When we're real little babies, our thymus gland is gigantic. It's bigger than our heart, bigger than our lungs. But as we get older, it shrinks down, and just stimulating it like this can help you to make it feel happy again. So you can try this with me. It's kind of a fun game. I'm going to say, ha, ha, ha. That's what I want you to say. Just say it any way you want to. Ha, ha, ha. Ha, ha, ha. Ha, 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 ha. Ha, ha, ha. Ha, ha, ha. Ha, 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 ha. Doesn't that make you feel so much happier just by saying ha, ha, ha? And so these are things that you can do to move to make yourself feel happier. In other words, it's taking responsibility for the situation, and you have to go through life one way or another. Like for instance, we have to live in this moment, and we can decide whether or not we're going to be happy or sad. And I just started to decide that I was going to be happy. I was going to try to think of things that would make me happier. And I found that actually exercising made me feel happier. Something about just getting my mind off of the situation. And I haven't actually told you what the situation was. But whenever I was 30, I was very much alive. I had a 2-year-old, and I had this small little fender bender. I was married for about 6 years at that time. And our relationship was so full of love. It was just so wonderful to me. I was very deeply in love. But after the accident, 2 years later, to the very day, we were served with papers from the sheriff's office that we were being sued for much more money than what we had. And my husband became very depressed, and he felt like everything that we had built up in our marriage, that I had wrecked it all. And he would often say that I ruined his life. Now, all I wanted to be is just the best mother and the best wife that I could possibly be. And he didn't think so. I was not pleasing him, and it caused me to feel really, really low. So I was sort of suffering from an identity crisis. I just, in my mind, thought, well, I will just always be the best mother and the best wife, and yet my own husband did not think so. And the more I tried to please him, I just couldn't. He actually became very depressed himself, and he just stopped working around the house and just sat in the chair and just kept saying I ruined his life. So the first 2 years of our lawsuit, I did okay. Third years, I totally bombed out. It was just too long of a haul for me. And I became so depressed that everything just seemed like heaviness. Clouds just all over me. I had a little 2-year-old at the time, and that was my first son, and I resorted to just laying on the sofa, the poor little guy. But a friend called one day, and she said to me, she said, "Oh, how you doing?" And I said, "No, I'm just not doing so well." And so she said, "Well, are you reading your Bible?" And I said, "No." I wasn't doing anything good for myself. I couldn't even think a positive thought. I could not think a positive thought. And she said, "Well, why don't you try reading Psalm 32 and 33? That is what I read this morning. It might be something in there." And so I could actually follow directions, but I couldn't think a positive thought for myself or any kind of an idea what I could do for myself at that point. And so I got my Bible out, and on 32:7, Psalm 32:7, says something about, "You are my hiding place, that you give me protection, and that you surround me with songs of victory to help me overcome." So anyway, I started thinking, song, okay, why don't I try singing something? So I would just start singing, and it was really funny how, this is what I learned later on, that thoughts, like compulsive thoughts, are on my left side of my brain, and that is also where fight and flight and like fear and everything is right over here on the left side, and it's all about past and present. Where the right side of my brain was where I'm sorry, not past and future. The right side of my brain was the present moment. There was play over there, a connection to God, and that's where singing was. And I could go from the left side of the brain, which was so compulsively thinking all these negative thoughts, and switch over to the right side of my brain. This right side, just this transition and starting to sing, I could sing about stuff that I wanted, not things that were bothering me. So say if I would think about kindness, I would sing a song like, "I am kind, I love kindness, kindness is the way to go, I love kindness." So it's just like concentrating on something I actually wanted in life. And it brought that kindness into my life. But the very next thing would say, the left side would say, "Yeah, but he wasn't kind." And then my right side would argue with it and say, "Yes, but what kind of life do you want to create, Mary Louise? Do you want a life full of kindness, or do you want to have regret and judgment towards people who aren't kind to you?" So I actually made decisions to switch over to the right side, and that's when I started playing. Like for instance, I would think about, like, okay, if I was in a bad mood or like very sad and depressed, I'm not very good at snap my fingers, but snap and jump over to another side, like as if I'm leaving that scene and going into another scene. And that seemed like it really, really helped. And just doing yoga and Pilates, like opening up my chest and just allowing myself to be opened up versus all cringed down like this in sadness, that helped. And that's just like a movement, just helped me to be much more able to respond to life issues. And another thing that I did that was very, very helpful was, this left side was compulsively thinking all the time, and I started thinking, I'm going to make God's shelf. And this comes from my interior design training. I'm actually interior designer. I don't do that anymore, but we were taught to think of whole, part, whole. Thinking of the whole project, which was our design project, which may be a whole house. But whenever we're working on a part of the house, maybe a bathroom, all the details of the bathroom needed to also go along with the whole rest of the house. Like if there was a theme at the house, like my theme at my house is garden, and I've picked about 5 colors. So you could get so involved in the bathroom and all the little details that you forget about the whole of the house. And so they were always teaching us to go back to whole, part, whole, or open up, whole, part, whole. And I thought, that's a picture of God's shelf. I could make a shelf at my house where I would write down all my problems and what I wanted God and I to think about and work out and work through, and I would write them down on index cards. And then I would put them on an actual shelf called God's shelf. And the idea was that that was just a very small part of my life, not the whole life, because that could seem like, wow, my life is just really, really dark and scary and just hard to deal with. But that was only a small part. The rest of it, I had a young son. There was sunshine every day. There's lots of things that I could be very, very happy about. And so I only allowed myself to think about God's shelf 30 minutes a day. Now, this is revolutionary because I was compulsively thinking about my problems all day long, and it kept coming into my life. But then I had something I could say to myself and say, Mary Louise, you have God's shelf. That's 30 minutes a day. You can worry as much as you want to on that 30 minutes a day, but the rest of the day belongs to you and the things you want to do. So some of the things I put onto God's shelf was just to be delivered from the lawsuit. This was a big financial burden because we didn't have money to pay for the lawsuit. And my husband looked at me as a financial burden. He would say stuff like, yeah, you do things and I have to pay for it. And I felt bad because I had actually stopped working as interior designer when my son was born. I wanted to stay home with him, and I couldn't help financially. I just felt really bad that I wasn't a joy to my husband anymore. And it was almost like a death to me. And death is very dark and dreary, but there are so many other things about my life that was so much alive. And so that was one of my secrets, God's shelf, whole, part, whole. In other words, on the parts, just allow a little bit of time to think about them, and then open up to the whole of life. And I did a lot of opening of my chest and just looking to the sky rather than looking down at the earth so much. So I found out one of the things I could not at all think about was the word what if. Like the left side of the brain is all about past and future. So the past would have a lot of regret, like why did I have this accident? I've, as my husband said, ruined everything. That's very dramatic type of thoughts. And the future was, well, what if this happens, or what if that happened? And I realized that I needed to take just that phrase, what if, put it in a box, tie it up, and send it away. I would not allow myself to even think about what if, because it was so dangerous to my soul. It was enough that would want to kill me. And so these are some of the things that work for me. So I would suggest that if you feel low, to try to move your body, because there's joy in movement, and there's something about getting in among other people and just moving with them. That's why I teach Latin and ballroom dance. I teach exercise classes. Those people come together. They love each other. They have a good time. And who knows, I may be saving someone from a very low time in their life by offering these things to them. So the fruit of the Spirit are love, joy, peace, patience, goodness, faithfulness, kindness, a lot of what I would call high vibes. And the things that got me in trouble would be the low vibes, like fear and regret and apathy and shame and blame. See, there's a lot of shame and blame in my marriage, and that was really, really bringing me down. But as I was going through this period of depression, the more that I just thought about the whole of life and giving my brain just a little bit of relaxation. Now, how I would do that was sort of touch my heart and try to get my right brain to communicate with my heart. I tried not to think about what all the left brain was doing, which was all that compulsive type thinking, very analytical, and fight, flight, or freeze type things was all over here. But over here was play and fun and a connection to God, and that was very, very important. Just to know that there was a God out there that was bigger than me. And oftentimes I'll hear of people that don't believe in God, and I just think, they probably are not ever had to have a time in their life that they had to pull on the extra resources of their brain. Just using the left brain all the time, you're missing out on a whole lot. The right brain having play and the connection to God, and that was very, very comforting. So there's something to do with me putting my hand on my heart. It connected my right brain together, and it gave me a sense of happiness. So that's what I would like for you to do. Just try to think more with your heart, which would be right brain, and try to let go of some of this analytical thinking of how you're going to fix the whole world, or, you know, plan A, B, and C. So often it doesn't happen that way. Not that planning isn't good for us, but we have to sometimes get away from all that and go into the more lighthearted place of our right brain and play and find joy in movement. And that's where all the lovely light living is. There's no compulsive thinking over on the right side. And this has been a great secret for me. So I found out later that there was a lady that wrote a book about this. She had had a stroke when she was 34, and her whole left brain shut down, so she could do none of that. All she had was the right brain to use. It took her 8 years to get her left brain back and working like a normal human being, because the left brain's important, because we'd do no planning if we didn't have the left brain. But her name is Dr. Jill Bolte Taylor. She wrote My Stroke of Insight and Whole Brain Living. And all the stuff that I was taught through depression, she actually put in that book. She's a PhD, and I feel like she adds to the fact that these things are true, and this is what worked for me. And so I would like to be able to share more of this type of things with people. So if you ever want for me to speak at your organization, just put out the word that you'd like for me. I have so much I can talk about. It is a very small part. And I have a website, MaryLouiseKing.com. Of course, the YouTube channel, which is the same thing, Mary Louise King, Lovely Light Living. And on Apple Maps and Google Maps, you can just Google my name and I'll come up. So thank you for listening to my story about how I overcame depression, and hopefully something just resonated with your heart, and you might even just try. Like God Shelf, that's a wonderful thing to try. And lifting your heart, good posture, looking up more, and just thinking about the things you want, like love, joy, peace. The other thing is, this was a secret that I learned, is that my life is like a song. And you know, in a song there are high points, there's high notes and there's low notes, and all those notes together make a beautiful song. And that's what our lives are like. It's not that we won't ever have the grief and the worry and the anxiety, the low, shame, blame type things. And then the higher notes of love, joy, peace, patience, they all go together. And there's sometimes you hold a note longer, or they come real fast, or there's rest. You know, there's a little sign that looks like the rest. That's when you rest, and then the song starts again. So whenever we're having these high spots and low spots, just always remember it's all part of being a song. And when we look back on our life at the end of our journey, we're going to know that life was a song. We made it through every single note, and that it's a beautiful song. So with that, I leave you, and namaste.